On the Arise Exchange this morning is Arise News Director Gary Anthony Ramsey, sitting in for U.S. Business Editor Andrew Schmertz. Hey, Gary.
Hey, Debbie. Thanks so much. Let's get right to the numbers on the street. The Dow is below its 50-day moving average, all numbers down just around 1%. Now, America's largest retailer, Walmart, has announced that it's cutting its profit forecast after the company blames higher payroll taxes for reducing customer traffic in the second quarter. Now, the company says it's downgrading profits per share from the year-end prediction of $5.10 to $5.30 from an earlier projection of $5.20 to $5.40. Now, that may not seem like much, but it's a sign that despite increased consumer confidence in the U.S. and lower unemployment numbers, less people are buying from the retailer, of course, a concern for Walmart long term. The company reported store sales in its U.S. stores slipped 0.3% in the second quarter. Analysts had expected sales to gain 1%. Well, better business for the company doesn't always translate to good news for employees. Take Cisco Systems, one of America's largest tech companies that makes network interfacing equipment and Wi-Fi systems, has announced that it will be laying off more than 4,000 employees, this despite the fact that Cisco's profits are up 18%. That's right. 18%. Company CEO John Chambers defended the move by saying the growth that they're experiencing now is not nearly what they want it to be. He thinks the cuts will help the company get ahead of an uncertain future in the tech business universe. The cut represents 5% of Cisco's entire workforce. Investors punished the move as Cisco's stocks plunged 8%. Now, we've talked a lot about on the exchange in recent weeks about Apple and how it continues to ward off and fight with would-be competitors in the world markets. Well, one company that's been getting a lot of attention in one facet of that competition is a Chinese company called Xiaomi. Its cheap mobile phones are selling like hotcakes. But as Jan Lanhee Lee explains, the company's CEO scoffs at the comparison.
7.45 million pre-orders, 100,000 sold out in 90 seconds. This isn't a new iPhone, but the Hongmi, or red rice, the latest cheap smartphone from Xiaomi, which went on sale this week. It's sometimes called China's Apple, but Xiaomi's now outselling the iPhone here, according to some measures, and it's gunning for sales of 15 million smartphones this year. I met up with founder and CEO Lei Jun in Beijing and asked him how the company can sell phones for so little and survive.
We're actually an internet company. We've already got a business in mobile phone hardware, and we want to add to that an internet platform. We can earn money from that once it's established.
So how can you call yourself an internet company? You sell mobile phones.
Well, I'd like to turn the question around and ask, what is an internet company? The internet represents an advanced way of thinking. Companies that are armed with this have an incredible competitive edge. Today, we're already China's third largest e-commerce company, and we've already built a massive mobile internet platform. And we have a lot of apps. We've built the MIUI firmware based on the Android OS, and it's a very strong system. People just don't get it. The mobile phone itself is only the carrier. Microsoft used to sell Windows in a box with a CD in it. Does that make Microsoft a paper box company? The box and the CD are only the carrier.
How do you feel about people referring to Xiaomi as China's Apple? And are there any Apple strategies, elements of Apple strategies that you admire or that you've adopted?
Xiaomi and Apple are two completely different things. I really don't like answering the question of whether Xiaomi is China's Apple. I think that the core problem is people don't understand Xiaomi. The main difference is that it is the internet that has made Xiaomi. Apple's design is very simple, and no matter who the customer is, there is one set solution. There are few opportunities to meet individual preferences, but Xiaomi's system can be changed by anyone.
Well, back here in the U.S., there is another competition of sorts taking place that leaders in the financial markets are watching with bated breath, and that is who will be the next United States Federal Reserve Chairman. Current chair Ben Bernanke, who has been at the helm since 2006, has said that he would not seek another term and would step down at the end of this term next January. In his wake are 3 publicly named candidates and, from what we can assume, a few others who are behind the scenes who might be the favorites of Wall Street. Currently up for consideration are Larry Summers, former top economic advisor to President Obama. He's also served as Treasury Secretary under President Clinton and was former chief economist for the World Bank between 1991 and 1993. Janet Yellen, considered a favorite among the Democrats in Congress, who've actually written a letter to the president endorsing her. She's the current vice chair of the Fed and a one-time chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors under President Bill Clinton. And there's Donald Cohn, a former vice chair of the Federal Reserve under George W. Bush and a former vice chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, as well as an economist of the World Bank. He's considered a moderate in banking and economic policy. Well, joining me to talk about those and other options in this important decision is Sanjay Sanghoee. He is author of the book Killing Wall Street and a shareholder advocate who's been outspoken on moves that the Fed has made in the past. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, with the 3 names we've mentioned and some of the other ones we haven't, who do you think will get it, why, and why is this an important decision?
I think it's going to be Larry Summers in the end, Gary, because Larry is the political heavyweight, and the competition isn't really that intense. Janet Yellen and Donald Cohn both are very well-credentialed people, but at the same time, neither of them has a track record of showing that they're going to be tough regulators, which is the real thing that's going to be involved in being the next Fed chairman.
Now, consumers who may be watching this thing phase in and phase out on how important they think it is. But this is huge because it decides how much credit, how much percentage they'll spend on the credit, how much money they'll spend on their houses, et cetera, right?
Right. I think the trickle-down effect of the Fed's monetary policy is going to affect all of us, particularly if the economy doesn't move in the right direction or it slows down because of any moves that the Fed makes. It's going to affect hiring, it's going to affect consumer spending, and it's going to show up on everyone's doorstep. But in addition to that, I think in this case, President Obama has made clear that he wants the next Fed chairman to be integrally involved in helping him perform his economic policy, which is to promote equality for all Americans. And the next Fed chair is also going to be involved in promoting Dodd-Frank and implementing and defining some of the measures of that bill. So I think the next Fed chair is going to be in a very powerful position, so it's a meaningful decision.
There is a school of thought, however, out there on the street that the current policies have been a disaster and the U.S. and global markets are not as good as we've been led to believe. And what's really needed here is higher interest rates that will shore up the value of the dollar as it exists right now. Do you subscribe to any of that?
I think there's a little bit of panic thinking in that and a little bit of sensationalism in that idea. There is validity that there could be another asset bubble forming. However, any increase in the interest rates has to happen extremely slowly and gradually in order to not impact employment and not to derail the economic recovery that we are seeing. So I don't think we have so much to worry about on that front, and the next Fed chair has to move pursue a very cautious line in taking us to the next step here.
Now, one of the pieces of this puzzle has been some pushback to Janet Yellen, who's been seen as a favorite among Democrats, but by some people on the street as just a politically correct pick because she would be the first woman of the U.S. Fed chair. She doesn't come to this, though, unqualified or underqualified, right?
Absolutely. Look, the fact that she's a woman shouldn't, frankly, have anything to do with this. It's more political spin than anything else. I think she is a very well-qualified lady. The only thing is she's primarily an academic. There is no guarantee that as the Fed chair, she would necessarily be much more of a tough regulator on Wall Street than Larry Summers. I think the primary selling point for Janet Yellen just right now is that she's not Larry Summers.
Okay. And speaking of which, the act that any of these people have to follow is Ben Bernanke, who's been knocked for the last couple of years as seen as somebody who's pulled the rabbit out of his hat 2 years ago, and there were no more tricks left. So if the person who's brought in has been would be following basically that same thing, isn't it going to make it tougher for this person to try to achieve President Obama's mandate for that position?
You know, I don't think so, because there are no more rabbits that we need to pull out of a hat. We are now in a much more stable economic place than we were a few years ago when Ben Bernanke had no choice but to pull a rabbit out of a hat, or we would have been in trouble. So I think the next Fed chair is going to be maintaining the status quo for the most part, and are going to slowly change the policies back to raise interest rates so that our economy doesn't get overheated. But I think they're going to have an easier time of it than Ben Bernanke. So they should, that's going to be the next mandate, is going to be looking at things other than just the monetary policy, such as Dodd-Frank, such as promoting economic equality, which aren't directly related to monetary policy, but more to regulatory policy.
Sanjay Sanghoee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Debbie?